Welcome, everyone. Hi, my name is Kismet Valentina, and I'm a sixth grader student. The next panel is Identity, Pitfalls, and Best Practices. Vinny from Civic will give a quick 3-minute demo. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Thanks, guys. How's it going? This is a last-minute edition. I was asked to do a quick demo, so I'll do this, and it shouldn't take 3 minutes because it's really quick. Can we get the WikiHow screen up? Cool. So this is our biggest partner so far. They've got over 150 million monthly active users worldwide. And Civic is a digital identity platform tool. It allows you to store your ID credentials on your phone with a set of private keys so you can get rid of usernames and passwords, and eventually, soon, you'll be able to hopefully sign up for bank accounts, exchange accounts without having to give up your passport information, your driver's license, your social security number, etc. And we're launching that pretty soon, but for now, I'll show you a quick demo of how Civic works. So when you go to the website to sign in, please click the Civic link. There we go. I've got the app on my phone. It pulls up a simple QR code on the screen. Let me scan it. Yeah. Cool. And there we go, logged in. So as simple as that. So if WikiHow got hacked tomorrow, there's no username and password for the hackers to steal and use on other websites. It's really quick. You can use this hopefully for banking and other services as well. And the only way that someone can gain access to your account is to steal the private keys physically off your device. Obviously Apple's pretty secure, and Android and malware is less of a concern. But the biggest thing about Civic is that we're moving away from centralized databases like Equifax, Experian, etc., where all your information is stored in one place, to decentralize on your device. Civic doesn't even know that transaction happened or that login attempt happened. Your information is only in one place. And so if one person does get their phone stolen or whatever the case is, they don't create systemic risk for everyone else on the network. Only their information gets stolen and hacked, and even then, it can be revoked remotely as well. So that's a quick demo on Civic. I'll be up later on. Thank you.
Now, Justin from Netgear will give a quick 3-minute demo.
Hi, everybody. I'm Justin. I'm the founder and CEO at Netgear. So what we've been focused on around digital identity is really providing digital identity services for blockchain companies, be they wallets, be they exchanges, or be they people doing ICOs, to build into their own experience to help them meet their risk and compliance needs. So what we've got, wow, the video says demo censored. I wondered what the uncensored version is. What we have here is a demo of some work we did for a blockchain company down in the Caribbean called Bit. But this is similar to work we do for a number of others in the space. So why don't you go ahead and just play the video, please.
In order to meet the requirements of your unique use cases, it can be readily customized, as was done for Bit. It can validate your country's IDs, driver's licenses, social security numbers, or other identity information. The app is easy to use and intuitive for your customers. Using their smartphone, they simply take a scan of the front of their ID, then a scan of the back of their ID, and because this is an app in 2017, a requisite selfie. At this point, a series of ID checks are run. Once this is complete, public records and sanctions lists are checked with the relevant authorities. After which, a validated identity certificate is generated for the user. We look forward to making your compliance operations faster
And then
easier.
when we're going to
For
run
more
the demo,
information, please visit us at the booth
they just
or
ask
email
to
us
switch over to it.
at
You guys will run that?
info@netkey.com.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, just give us the cue and
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay.
Now, Armin from... Now Armin from Showcard will give a 3-minute demo.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Armin Ibrahimi. I'm the founder and CEO of Showcard. We're a Bay Area startup, started in 2015. What I'm going to show you is our app for digital identification. And basically the concept is that you grab identity information, you scan that through a driver's license, passport, whatever the documentation is. The data gets loaded on your phone, doesn't go anywhere else. I'm going to show you the app on the phone here. I think if I put it here, so you actually see my own ID. Does it show up there? Could we get that reflected back up on this stage? There we go. So there's my driver's license, my own passport, my own personal card that has some of that information. I know you can't quite see all of it there, but the metadata is not, and it's hard to actually see the data down here for any of that. Let me see if the driver's license looks any better. You can't see the data there, but what we do is we basically extract all the metadata so you could decide what it is that you're going to share with regards to your ID. You can get other things like bank cards and other information also scanned. Some of those I won't show you because it's got my actual bank cards on it, but we work with a lot of financial institutions, airlines, and so on for being able to scan your information, get certified once, but being able to use those in real-time transactions afterwards. What happens is your data is encrypted and kept on your device, but we don't ever trust any device. So what happens is servers and service providers will end up looking on the blockchain to see is that data certified. And what we put there are there's no encrypted data that we put on the blockchain because eventually you could hack into those, but there's digital signatures of one-way hashes of data that's on the blockchain, and that stands as your certification. You do that as a self-certification of your data. A third party, like a bank, a government, does the same thing. With that, if we could switch over to the demo, and you'll actually see a demo that, not a demo, but a video that will actually describe some of the functionality a little bit more.
Identity theft and fraud brings institutions, businesses, and merchants losses that cost up to billions of dollars each year. Some authentication methods do not work well and are not secure against hackers. Consumer-friendly, secure, and always on. This is Showcard. Showcard is a consumer-friendly and secure app that's built to support mobile, desktop, or even brick-and-mortar transactions well. This easy-to-use mobile app can even be relied on by some of the biggest banks. It can be integrated with different mobile apps to improve the authentication process. It helps cut costs and fraud losses. For credit card transactions, Showcard helps verify the individual's identity and authority to use the card. It also features authorization with facial recognition, which can confirm the user's identity and authority to perform high-value transactions without having to go to a bank's branch. Showcard's call center authentication solution allows customer care groups to authenticate users in just a matter of seconds over the phone. Showcard is also passwordless. Users can just simply register for and log into websites, stores, institutions, and more. The Showcard platform is built on a public blockchain data layer, so they do not store data or keys that will compromise the user's security. All data is hashed and digitally signed and stored on the blockchain, so it cannot be tampered. Everything is kept on your phone and not on some shady database, so your personal data cannot be hacked or compromised. Visit showcard.com and know the Showcard difference.
Thank you.
Now we have Rovan from Uport will give a 3-minute demo
you.
of us.
Thank you, and also thank you to everyone here in Lithuania and Vilnius. I've been here for the first time. I've been here about a day now. Beautiful city, very friendly people, so I appreciate that. And hopefully I can be back here again.
Hi, my name is Reuven. I work at Consensus on the digital identity project called Uport. I will not give the demo now. We do two things. We do also identity, so for login and other things, what you have seen now several times. But since Consensus purposes, we are building Ethereum-based applications of all different types. So our focus is not only on the identity part, but as well being an interface and a tool for using Ethereum applications. So I have a talk tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and I will show the interaction with blockchain using our application. Thank you.
Hey, here we go. Thanks, everybody. We're excited to be here today. We're going to jump right in now with a panel here on identity. My name is Matt Larson. I'm with Microsoft and a crypto enthusiast for the past couple years. So looking forward to diving a bit deeper here around the identity topic. So we heard some, from your demos a little bit about what decentralized identity is. But first question to kick it off, why is decentralized identity better than the alternative? We got Equihacks and we've got all kinds of problems with the current system. Why is what you guys are working on in decentralized identity better than what we have today?
What do we have today? I mean, today we basically have a network of just look at companies and start with the credit providers that are sitting with just huge amounts of consumer data piled into these databases, which are getting hacked on an ever more increasingly frequent basis. So I don't think we have anything which is worth even talking about today, if you think about it.
Let me, I'll add another point to it. I think part of it is security, right? And having central databases, we give great opportunity to hackers to hack one database, get millions and millions of records. But actually, I'll extend it a little bit more. There's a question of opportunity. When you have central databases, sharing data is very difficult. One, because of security. Who are you going to share that with? How do you make sure that nobody, like a hacker, doesn't end up accessing that data? And what do you share? So that's one aspect of it. Then you start looking at the new world, especially as we're looking at what cryptocurrencies are creating for us, what the internet has created for us, is that we are becoming more and more of a global world. A lot of our clients, what their requirements are being cross-border. In cases where you're not even allowed to share those central databases, new opportunities get created where users have their own data. You could travel from one country to another, grab your credit report information with you, and they can independently validate it and say, yep, the data is correct. And they don't have to contact different agencies with different central databases to get it. So I think a lot of new opportunities get created. And on top of that, it's far more secure, and users can keep data private to themselves. They only share with who they want, not the hackers or others.
Maybe one thing I would like to add is about the control. I think we put the user back into control of the identity. For now, even if it's not obvious, because we live in a world where you trust LinkedIn, Facebook, and others to control your identity, but it's not truly yours. And in certain countries, people stop giving the authority to actually use this, or they block your account. So I think that's one really key point. And the second one is building a portable reputation. So at the moment, your reputation is always with eBay, Airbnb, whatever, and now you can actually have something which is assigned to yourself, and you can take this to other services, which makes a completely different economy possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that kind of is a corollary to what you just said here is, in the past on the internet, in most cases, you never got to really say anything for yourself. It was always someone else that said you said something. And so the examples I would give for that is like, today you don't actually say something on Twitter. Twitter says you said that on Twitter. And Google says you said that on Google. It's never emanating from you. They're the source of authority on what you said. And because we're moving to a world with digital signatures that the user's in control of, for the first time ever, they're the ones saying things on their own behalf, right? And I think that's one of the fundamental shifts of these new platforms that is maybe in some ways parallel to some of the other benefits around, preventing hacking of central databases and other things, but is really like a fundamental shift of the way that identity and speech is perceived on the internet.
So I want to add something. I think this is a pretty boring topic for most people. Okay, for us, we're kind of geeking out on identity. It's a boring topic. So I'm going to ask some questions to the audience quickly. Who has had their identity stolen and, for example, fraud committed on their credit report, something along those lines? Okay, so it's not a big part of the audience. Okay, who's been impersonated on Twitter or public forums, and to that extent, like fake Twitter accounts, etc. Okay, now let me ask you the last question. Who is sick and tired of using username and passwords because they get hacked at Yahoo and everyone else can access your accounts, etc.? This is the real problem here. Isn't in the short term, it isn't what's happening in your credit report. It's the inconvenience of having to have your credit card changed, having to have username and passwords changed, having people, still access one big database and be able to then access all your personal data source, and just the time and effort. So, but here's the problem. That's the short-term problem. The reason it's a short-term problem is because you can go on the dark web right now, go buy the Yahoo database, write a bot, and go after 1,000 websites and hope that you get a hit on someone's username and password on those websites. That's the short term. The long game is what they're doing with your credit report, getting information about you and actually targeting identity theft. So you're going to see this becoming more prevalent in 2, 3, 4 years' time, given the hacks that have just happened right now. So what do we do as an industry? We need to focus on the long term, but we also need to make sure in the short term you understand why we are getting to that point and how to make your life easier right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I was reading an article, I think it was you, Vinny, in Forbes, talking about comparing digital identity to traditional identity. And when we show up at a bar, we show them our driver's license, and that the security guy at the bar doesn't know our information, doesn't store that for later for them to be hacked, right? It's just this very transactional thing. And so that's what bringing digital identity should be, right? It should reflect identity in the real world. And I think we're all on board, right? I want to try out some new application, but I have to get my email again. I have to create a new password. So I think we're all sold. What is it? What needs to happen? What are you guys doing? Who are the companies, the partners that you guys are working with in order to, bring that to the mainstream?
I think we've come a long way since a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, when I would present and I would talk to banks and so on, we would only talk to the researchers. And these were other geeks just like ourselves who want to come in and basically just talk about the technology, and they found it interesting. We've come a long way in that, in particular verticals. We've seen more movement, at least for our company, we've seen a lot more movement and adoption in the financial industry, some in the air travel. We've seen less of it in the health, but where we see the health vertical itself is a great opportunity. But it is ultimately those institutions adopting it, and adopting it for doing real transactions, and we're seeing that happening now. This is some of our partners. There's still some of them, I think you and I talked before, still stay in the closet. We can't always announce what their names are. But what they're doing is smaller deployments where they're actually doing everything from username, passwordless login, to being able to do credit card authorization, to doing KYC and sharing KYC from one financial institution with others. But it's when we start seeing those adoptions, in particular verticals, is when the doors start opening up.
We're seeing some different approaches than that, although I do agree that that's a great path as well. We're actually working on a couple of projects, or in late phases of proposals on a couple of projects around national identity platforms, where there's governments either, generally at a national level, that basically have a digital identity initiative for the country. And they're looking at using that as a tool, first as a way to access government services, and so they can get a critical mass that way. Everyone pays their taxes, everyone has a lease, other things like that, right? And then also then over time opening that up to the private sector as ways that banks can automate their KYC, that other services that you're receiving from medical and others can make use of that platform, either directly in a blockchain-based way or over APIs as a front to get in. So I think there's different approaches that are going to take hold and take place in different jurisdictions and different use cases. And in, I think, many of the places in the world, it'll probably be driven by the private sector. And in some of the places in the world, it'll get driven by sort of a national plan.
Yeah, maybe just to add on the comments before, now we are at BlockCon, so there's a lot of blockchain things happening in the world. So I think in that sense, identity is a key part for this whole blockchain ecosystem as well. So how do you know the other party on the other side of the smart contract is relevant? For Bitcoin, it's not that required. For the more advanced things we're exploring at the moment, identity is such a key part. So I think that's where we close the loop also, like not only using the blockchain for building an identity platform, but as well using an identity platform to, I don't know, build this whole ecosystem we're talking about here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And along those lines, I mean, this is, like you said, everybody's here doing something related to blockchain. You guys are sort of abstracted a bit from, public blockchains in a sense, but I think most of the outside world looks, here's the words blockchain, here's the words crypto, and immediately thinks the price of Bitcoin is dropped by 30%, right? So would you guys, when you have conversations with banks or with other companies in the private sector, is that a wall of education that you guys have to overcome? Is that a challenge, or how have you seen that shift over the years as well?
In my impression, I think a year and a half ago, it was more of a thing. I think the last 18 months have shifted most of the thinking. If people are in the space, then they recognize identity is a huge topic. If they're not in the space, they hear now more and more positive things. So the association of Bitcoin is significantly less now.
I think I agree with you. I think education has changed dramatically. A couple years ago, blockchain meant Bitcoin, and in fact, a lot of times, we use blockchain as a means of creating certifications, independent validation, and like, what the heck is blockchain? So it's what Bitcoin was built on. So, oh no, okay, I know what that is, because they didn't even know what blockchain was. I think now the understanding has changed quite a bit. I think one of the things that's still important, and I think this is important for every product, every company, is that you got to have a real product with a real solution. So when we go to clients, we don't tell them, hey, we got a blockchain solution. That's not of interest to a lot of folks. What we do is we say, look, we have an identity management that gives you, easier to use, better safety, security, and here's the things you could do. So we talk about identity management. Then the question comes down to, well, how do you do it? And then we talk about how we use the blockchain, which is no different than the way we've used to build products before. And in fact, the rest of the world still builds products. You always got to focus on what's the solution you're building.
Yeah. So, because we do digital identity for blockchains, not digital identity on blockchains, I'm going to, again, I think, give the yes and answer, which is I agree that in 90% of the discussions that we're in, well, probably not, 75% of the discussions we're in, the price of Bitcoin, the price of Ethereum, those kinds of things don't matter at all to the project that's going on. But because we do work on public blockchains, and in particular because digital identity ties into compliance and to risk on public blockchains, what we do see is as the price of Bitcoin goes up, and to a lesser extent the price of Ethereum, Bitcoin is still driving the conversation at the institutional levels. They see increased levels of their best customers that are interested in owning and holding the asset, which are driving traditional financial services firms closer and closer to actually providing some level of Bitcoin services, be it buy, sell, be it custodial holding of keys or other things like that. And so certainly those discussions, price does play into, because the price drives interest, and interest drives what's going on with those companies. One of the things I think that's super exciting about that, as somebody that believes a lot in public blockchains and the power of public blockchains, is that I think that those kinds of institutions getting on board, it becomes a tipping point for digital currency, because the day that in somebody's bank of wherever account they see buy, sell a Bitcoin, it doubles in one day the number of people that have been exposed to Bitcoin in history, right? And the next place that does it doubles it again. And so the hockey stick starts to take off in a way that we actually haven't seen before now.
Right. The virtuous cycle of interest driving more adoption, and then it spirals out of control. So one of the next question I want to ask, you guys have been in the blockchain space for a while, sort of before this whole ICO craze came upon us. So I'd love to hear sort of some thoughts and considerations around, some of you have done an ICO, others haven't. Vinny, why don't we start with you, kind of your thoughts and considerations around choosing to take Civic down the ICO route?
I think it was a very interesting decision.
We obviously looked at the landscape, and it was, I think our timing was pretty good as well. What's really changed is if you take out the nature of what our token does, but what's the fundamental change that you've seen worldwide is capital formation has changed. Okay, and in a way that I don't think we'll ever go back to necessarily one or the other anymore. It's not just VC, private equity, pension funds, etc. It's now crowdfunding to a large extent, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that. If you look at how people in other parts of the world participated in technological revolutions in call it in the US, for example. So I'll give you guys an example. I'm from South Africa, born and raised there. And when I was about 20 years old, I was trading the South African stock market during 1999, which was obviously the big bubble and run up. And the South African stocks were somewhat they weren't as sort of high flying as the US stocks. But the point is, I couldn't buy any US stocks. And this is 1999. I couldn't go and buy any shares of Commerce One or any of those companies because I was restricted because I was in South Africa and you need a social security number. Do you realize that it's nearly, 20 years nearly have passed, and it's still the case? People in foreign countries, whether they have dollars, rands, whatever other currency, they cannot participate in the US stock markets or foreign markets. It's just because the way these stock exchanges are set up, it means that there's effectively a restriction. So what's happened now through the internet is capital formation has changed. If you want exposure to technology assets, you no longer need to go through a stock market. You can go buy a cryptocurrency, for example. It still gives you the edge in new and emerging technologies. And this appeals primarily to the young folks. So guys in their teens, early 20s, 30s, etc. Less so the older folks, and they obviously at that point they have more wealth accumulation, so they're looking for less risky assets. But the kids who have got $10,000, $20,000, they don't care if they lose it, but they actually want to make it $1 million. So they'll go for high risk technology assets. And so this has changed the way we view the world, because these funds can now flow from any part of the world to any other country in the world as well, using cryptocurrencies and crypto markets. And I'm very excited to see regulated exchanges coming to the fore now, where you can actually buy regulated securities and regulated ICOs on the exchanges. In the next year or two, I think it's going to be one of the most common ways of raising funding in an environment where it's been unregulated up to now. So I think the key thread here is how capital formation has changed. Forget the use cases. And so some companies have come, and I obviously see a lot of deal flow around this. Some guys are coming and they've actually got no ecosystem, no need for a token, nothing, but they want to raise the money. And quite frankly, they can actually raise the money as a security. And so and using cryptocurrencies to fund it from 150 countries worldwide. So that's the interesting observation I would have.
Yeah, I think on your last point, it needs to make sense. And I think I've seen so many tokens which just don't make sense. It might make sense, but if you can replace it with money or with other form of payments, then it might likely be not the right token.
But the point is, it doesn't need. So the issuance of a token as a utility token is very different from the issuance of a token as a security token.
Absolutely.
And so I think we're going to see more and more securities being issued, because there's absolutely no reason these companies should have a utility token, but they absolutely can raise a security token and raise money as a security, and that's fine.
No, absolutely. Yeah. But I think most of the people try to avoid SEC regulations, so they try to do a utility token where, in many cases, it doesn't feel like a utility, and I think that's where some people might be like. I think if it's a equity, then you can pivot your business model. But many people are now bringing out a token, and how do they pivot over time? So that's kind of more tricky. So that's kind of the interesting part.
Let me add a couple of points here. I think we're in the very early stages. We're going to see a lot of development and maturity in the space. But there are some key things that's happening with the ICOs. One of those is that alternate forms of funding, like you were saying, Vinny, alternate forms of funding initiatives is getting created. Part of that will actually change the whole VC market. I think VCs will become more responsible, more proactive. They will be they'll have to bring in a lot more value than money. I think they will still continue to have a play in the world. But it changes the way a lot of startups get created. And some startups could have great ideas. They just can't get past that funding, or they get some funding, they don't get enough funding. Well, this gives them an opportunity to survive. I think there's a flip side to it, and I agree with what you're saying, is that whether you raise it as a security or a token, and some of those are shorter term things, I think there will be more regulation, there will be more control over that, which I think will be good for the market overall. But I think at the end of the day, we all have to remember, you're still building a company, you're still building products, you gotta have something that works. If you don't have that, and you raise a whole bunch of money, then you're not gonna succeed. So one is that you're not gonna succeed. Two, you wasted people's money. And three, eventually, you'll get filtered out and you won't be able to do that. So I think at the end of the day, whether it's a security you raise or a product, you better have a purpose for it, and you better still focus on how do you serve your consumers, how do you serve your businesses, your customers, your clients, and how do you create a real business value in it?
And I mean, maybe a final quick piece on this is I want to share in saying I think that this is a very exciting new model, particularly in the kinds of new things and the kinds of new communities that can be funded. As a result of it, the one thing I would urge is, those of you that are going to be pioneering in this space, make sure that you're getting good advice and good counsel, and that you're making sure you're doing things in a way that provides you the right protections, because you're doing the right things for the people that have invested money in your token and are depending on your services. Because there are people that are going to get washed out of this space because they're not doing things the right way. And that is going to cause enforcement actions and all kinds of other stuff to happen. And one, you always want to be able to go to sleep at night feeling that you're doing the right thing, right? But two, you don't want to feel like, because you didn't take the proper care up front or think about the risks the right way up front, that now you're spending time looking over your shoulder, worrying about what might be coming, instead of being able to focus on building your disruptive innovation. It's really hard to innovate when you're spending all your time in a courtroom. So,
in the courtroom or trying to get it on a bank account, because there are many token launches who raised money, thought they are good, and now they have trouble to actually use it because they can't.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Be able to sleep at night. Good advice. So we'll end on one final question, rapid fire round. We've seen sort of the democratization of money. I think everybody saw early on that identity would be a big part of this whole decentralization movement. What are some things that you guys, some industries or some other things that are going to be decentralized over the next coming years, and 5-10 years down the road now?
Yeah, so I work in a company, we do all kind of decentralization work. So we have projects from supply chain to music platforms, everything from token launches. And I think the interesting thing is now using this kind of decentralized technologies that it's super transparent. So if someone has solved a problem and you have a smart contract somewhere, you can just reuse it. It has been security audited. So I think what we will see is that many of these components are solved, and now we're just reusing them. And then you can build business on top of this in a much, much easier and faster pace. I think that's just general.
I have to say that in the short term, I'm actually really excited about the idea of unique digital assets or unique digital art, because it for the first time creates a way for creative people to be able to be paid for their uniqueness for online objects. And I think that's going to be exciting with what's happening in virtual reality and social and in other areas, where people can now show their appreciation to artists and others. In the long term, I'll be honest, what I'm excited about is the things that we can't picture now. When we were in the early days of the internet, it was easy to see that email was coming, and it didn't take a ton of vision to see that video on the internet was coming. But I don't think anyone saw things like Uber or Airbnb or Pokemon Go or blockchain coming as a result of the internet. And so I think it's the things that are going to be invented by the people that don't see the same constraints that we see today as a result of the first wave of decentralization that's happening right now.
Yeah, I think I actually totally agree with you. The unknown will be some of the biggest opportunities that will get created. But I think if I were to pick on some things where I see those opportunities using the blockchain, is anything that uses data. And it could be anything from the deed to your house, it could be the pink slip on your car, any kind of data you have, and you want to be able to prove something is yours. You don't necessarily want to share it with everyone. And a lot of these are not just pure digital documents, but documents that could be transformed into digital form. But you want to sell a car on eBay, but you want to be able to prove that you actually own that. But being able to show that digitally, do the transaction for both the comfort of the buyer and confidence of the buyer as well as the seller. So I think we'll see more and more applications that actually start looking at different forms of data and being able to use the blockchain as a form of decentralization of that and being able to do the validation.
I mean, for us at Civic, the ultimate goal for decentralizing things would be to decentralize democracy. Democracy is not decentralized right now. It's actually very centralized. If you look at even countries that practice democracy, there's highly centralized, pillars of power within those countries, and on a global scale, I don't think we're very much even close to being a democratic world. It doesn't mean that democracy works at scale with 7 billion people, but can you imagine, we want to discuss gun control laws, you just send a notification to everyone's phone and you have a vote right then and there. There's no more discussion, and people can we can actually make a change in the world if democracy was decentralized and there was no one holding on to power and trying to tell us how we feel about things. We can actually poll that in real time. So that's where I think we should be going with Civic anyway. We want to go to the point where everyone in the world has an identity. Everyone can respond on their mobile phone to questions about their identity or related to their identity. You can walk into a building using your phone. You can vote on your phone for governments, for company stuff, whatever. Like, you basically can use your identity and assert yourself. And that's the ultimate form of decentralization, where you have 7 billion people in the world doing whatever they feel is in their best interest and the interest of society.
That's awesome. Yeah, great note to end on. So Vinny, Armin, Justin, Reuven, thank you very much. Let's give a big hand for our panel,
Thank
guys.
you, Matt.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.